is up, guys? It is Friendly Jordies, as you can see by this shirt, available at friendlyjordies.com. Make sure that you press like, make sure you press subscribe, and can you do me a favor? That's right, can you press the notification bell? Let's go! Today we're talking about the top 4 things you can do, that's right, you right at home, can do to help out in New South Wales politics. People are always saying to me, all you ever do is one, Jordies, you never offer any solutions. Here's a solution.
Cut your hand off so you can't bug me anymore.
I did that like 5 times out of 700 videos, and yet you call yourself a fan. I bet you haven't even seen Uncle Jono's. So to refresh your memory, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Friendly Jordies Recycled Clip Show Spectacular. Because what's more entertaining than watching someone repeat themselves? I want you to tick these off because this is the ultimate guide to being smug. If you're one of those people who think, I'm better than Jordan Peterson because I actually believe in climate change. Where do you work? NAB. What? I'm a victim of the system. Now we gotta snort coke or not? Sorry, but you do have to do slightly more than write dickheady comments online to be a good person. But here's how you do the absolute bare minimum for maximum impact while making yourself rich in the process. And no, I'm not a financial advisor. I just have a PhD in reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. Well, half of it. I think I got the gist of it. Do you know what an asset is? Yes. It's a pun used in a title of a lot of porns I've seen in my life. Corporate asset. Actually, you should encourage people to manage their own super. No. And you know why? Because most people have a girlfriend and don't have an ABN. If you're like the vast majority of people and don't want to sit around reading forums all day about Qantas buying a new class of refueling truck, but you do want your money that you won't see until you're 65 anyway, building a bunch of sustainable projects in the meantime, and who doesn't apart from one particular fat Hey! And this is the incredible bit, while you're making more money than your current super fund is anyway. Isn't this nuts? Last year, Future Super beat all the other super funds, sucked in whoever was second. Even when including the little whine people had in the comments of, the fees are slightly higher than a super fund with 2 million people in it, who'd have guessed? Where does your money go? Killing orangutans. Better than sacrificing a coffee's worth of money a year. God, a lot of people would be just as as Martin Shkreli if they were given half the chance. You know, a few people have told me that ever since they switched to Future Super, it gave them a 10% return even after fees, which they bring down every time their membership goes up, like they did last time I gave them a shout out because they're not as greedy as you. And as a result, the people that did pull out, put it into Future Super, you collectively got out $120 million out of fossil fuel investments last year. That is more money than Joe Rogan's podcast producer has. $120 million going out of building things like this, and instead going into things like this. What? That's renewable? You're telling me you don't want that in your house? And finally end the 2GB point of, what are you going to do for backup power? This! Suck it! The big goal here is to shift 7.7% of super over to investments in renewables, because if we do 100% renewable energy grid by 2030, no matter who's in government. So, if you like your industry super, fine, just ask to be switched over to the sustainable portfolio, but if you're with a retail super, there's the link in the comments. It'll take you 5 minutes to switch. It'll make you hundreds of thousands of dollars unless you die before you can claim it, in which case you won't be needing money where you're going. Kempsey Cemetery. Yeah, get ready to have some year 10s going at it knuckles deep over your eternal resting place. In the meantime, switch your bank from one of the big 4 to either Great Southern Bank, Me Bank, or Bank Australia. Listen to that intro. And people think I'm actually paid by these organisations. Let me ask you this question. Do you think Me Bank wants the phrase knuckles deep anywhere near it? If they had any marketing sense, they would. Tired of the big 4? Get knuckles deep in me. Go on, have a feel around today. Come up with all the conspiracy theories you like of If I'm paid by anyone, I have to legally tell you, and thus it's my legal obligation to inform you that I'm actually sponsored by Siegfried and Roy's most inbred tigers selection. Look at the eyes on that one. I shout them out because unlike pedestrian, I actually believe in things. I'm trying to remind you little edgy undergrads that just because there's Netflix documentaries that say this revolution comes by throwing cocktail bombs or San Lorenzo della Margio losing these finals, You know what usually makes big changes? Enough money moving from one industry to another that the investor class says, no, we're not doing that anymore. You're the boss. We did the maths last year when the audience was smaller, but if you all switched your bank over and your super, that would be easily tens of billions of dollars of investment freed up to build sustainable homes and invest in projects that are trying to improve the environment, like, I want to refilm Passion of the Christ, but the cast is exclusively made up of midgets. A working title is On the Shoulders of Christ, and it's sustainable because a cornerstone of sustainability is to think small. Now, you want to shift trillions of dollars? It's the best investment you could make and it won't cost you a cent. Convince one person you know to vote Labor. Just one. From now to the election, that's it. If you're in a regional seat, forget what I said. Convince someone to vote for whoever's most likely to beat a national. Bobcatter, an independent, shooters, fishers, even if it's the Hey for Donna Hay party, where the FAQ on their website is one sentence. No, this is not a joke party. Stop asking. One. It's not like I haven't given you literally hundreds of reasons and arguments on this channel, all backed by either fact or flash. But let's go through some of the hits. Far superior infrastructure projects like, let's build a transnational rail, as opposed to, nah, transnational isn't a marginal seat. Here's a big idea. Let's build a car park in Gosford for pretty much the same money. I've got a donor who'd love to skim that much money off the top, Scott. Awesome. In fact, Labor's infrastructure projects from the last time they were in were the only thing that kept our economy ticking over and growing, beside having the worst economic managers in the developed world presiding over it for the last decade. On the climate, if Labor was in control, we would have smashed our 2020 targets as opposed to going backwards under the Libs. So instead of arguing till you're blue in the face with a Lib or Green voter, just go to the source, the natural voting bloc of the Labor Party. People who watch Channel 7. Anyone who spells Labor, Labor. Anyone who didn't grow up in French's Forest and migrate to Newtown because they like the aesthetic of being poor. Anyone who has lived a normal to shit life, Labor voter. Anyone who thinks, you're Labor, Liberal, can't give any examples as to why they're the same, but trust me, the only one I'm voting for is the Dare Ice Coffee Party, but they never get in the government. It's because it's rigged. Well, if they're all what difference does it make for you to put a 1 next to the Labor candidate instead of drawing a cock on the ballot? Like, how many times can you do that before the joke gets old? Infinite. Fair enough. But a few thousand more ones and a few thousand less cocks would have honestly been the difference in the last election between having a PM that would have helped out in the bushfires instead of one that off to Hawaii. One that would have spent your money on a fleet of firefighting helicopters instead of advertising, how good are we? A few thousand more ones would have been the difference between having a government that would have spent the COVID recovery on building a green army that would be currently regenerating areas devastated by the bushfires, public housing, renewables, and one that got us into $1 trillion of debt with literally nothing to show for it except for record foreign company profits. Now, I know at this point the self-management super fund guy is asking, you don't know the name of those companies, do you, mate? But anyone normal and not listening to this, just understand that in virtually every election, Labor is massively outspent by the Liberals and dark money. That doesn't even include outside spending. It doesn't even include mainstream press from ABC to Sky all having one specific goal: keep Labor out of power. It doesn't include, and this is where it gets scary, data. You probably think these two major parties have this massive, well-oiled machine in their HQs filled with thousands of Professor Frinks crunching the numbers and saying, yeah, say the phrase, how good more, Mr. Morrison. Wow, you're more of a rat than me. Well, it's half true. The Liberals have that. Labor doesn't. They don't have the money for it. You think it's this Oscar De La Hoya versus Mayweather fight from back in the day where the Liberals are Mayweather, just a tiny bit better. The reality is the Liberals are the robot army in Terminator and Labor's the human resistance. It's not even that much of a metaphor, seeing as the Liberals are primarily funded by big business while Labor's primarily funded by workers, so that reality really is machines versus men. The Liberals have Crosby Texter shit that'll blow your mind, pinpoint accuracy of a robot telling them, show up to this specific Scouts Hall, promise a new coat of paint. Their mums will tell the swing voters in the electorate you will win by a margin of 3%. In contrast, you know what the Labor Party has? A bus. I fucking told you it was like Terminator. This is conquistadors versus the Aztec stuff. The only advantage we have is that people actually give a shit on our side. If an audience this size convinced just one person they know, it's very simple. One party gave us the best economy on earth during a crisis, while the other made us the worst in the developed world. An audience that size doing that, election tied up. Libs are never getting back in if you do that. If you've convinced someone, let us know how you did it in the comments. I'd love to know, but I'm telling you, you're always picking hard targets. You're always picking your dickhead housemate or your dad that has a boat in the driveway. If your dad has a boat in the driveway, don't bother. Talk about the cricket. And the reason Labor's one of the best performing parties on earth? Union scam. Tom Hartman explains this point well in his latest book on oligarchies, but the reason the Australian Labor Party is one of the best performing governing outfits in the world, time after time, by pure government metrics, is that this country still has some semblance of a union movement. And though these days it may look like the organisational equivalent of this dog hanging in there, there's a reason the middle class declines in direct alignment with union membership declining, and that's because despite the press attacking unions for 100 years straight, the same corporate elite that control the press, that are always doing that, they're very pro-certain unions if you look at their coverage. They love the Business Council, love the Minerals Council. The elite understand how important unions are, which is why they don't want you having one. When Reagan was elected, he really only had one job apart from being a funny and that was smash the unions. Why? It was the Democrats' main source of funding. Before morning in America, there was a party that was widely funded by workers and therefore governed in the interests of the majority of the population. Once Reagan smashed the unions, he starved the Democrats of funding, and in order to win elections, they still needed money, so they went, no, we'll go to cuddly corporations like banks and the financial sector. They understand the struggle of the common man. Which is why now, and I'm never going to make the they're the same childish argument, but you look at virtually any metric you can measure a government on. Not even a shadow of the Labor Party here. In fact, the Democrats resemble more the Liberals under Malcolm Turnbull, and that's because funding from workers was ended, and therefore, so too did their representation. Why do you think the Labor Party barely ever gets in here, while in the US the Republicans and the Democrats 50-50 split? Because the two parties that are competing there are basically two business factions going at it. Ours is one business faction versus a workers faction. And so the rich and powerful have no interest at all in seeing the workers faction elected. So shut the up anyone in the comments that's about to write, they used to be a workers party and now they aren't. Well, stats say different to your vague narcissistic bitching. Sorry. It happens everywhere that unions get smashed. Japan is more or less a one-state party. Literally next to never does the opposition get elected. Their Liberal Party in power almost constantly, and as such, Liberal Democrats make sure Mitsubishi and Sony get looked after, never the workers, ever. The working population never gets a raise, and therefore the economy is in a permanent recession, and it's all because Japan's unions are virtually non-existent. You can't let the unions die. You have to join up. Ever since I was 14, every time I had a job, I signed up to the union. I still pay my fees to this day because even though I'm an employer and I know that all that a union could do at this point is f me up, I do it because I know that if you don't have unions, you don't have a democracy. The average union member makes 32% more than the average non-union worker. If you're in a union, you on average earn close to $1,500 a week. If you're not, $1,100. So I think that extra $400 a week maybe cancels out the f***ing piss weak union fees, which is why the fifth best thing you could do is give us some money on Patreon. The sixth good thing you can do, sign up to Ecosia. You'll end up planting tens of thousands of trees a year. Pretty much every time you fap, you plant a sap. Like and subscribe. Yes, I put a tracker on the links purely so I can say in another video, oh wow, look at how many of you did it. Wow, that's amazing. Thanks guys.
Please share and comment below. Comment.